The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Av8rTony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 78 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 10th of May, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's episode, Rob D and I have the opportunity to speak with an outstanding aviator that I would definitely place in the 10% category. And if you have not heard me use that term before, you will soon learn what that is all about. He is a University of Illinois graduate, an exceptional photographer, and avid cyclist, a green thumb gardener, a former SandPiper Airlines captain, and assistant to the VP of Flight Ops and Flight Director. He currently flies a Boeing 737 for a U.S. mainline carrier we here on the show like to call Legacy Airlines. We are excited to hear about his journey and his philosophy on the profession of aviation. But before we complete our pre-flight for episode 78, I would like to take a moment to express our many thanks to Captain Jerry Quinn for joining us on episode 77. How's my sick voice? We enjoy the conversation and we hope you did as well. Thanks again, Jerry, and we look forward to having you on again real soon. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 78 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. To help me kick off today's show is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international and professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP, an avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. From his remote international sound studios on the 7th floor of the Westin Hotel in Guadalajara, where he is on day one of a 2-day trip, help us in welcoming our very own Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hola, ¿cómo estás usted?
Muy bien, gracias.
Doing good, bud. Good to be back. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. You know, we missed you on the last show.
I know.
And you had very good reason that you couldn't make it. And what was that, sir?
I was hoping my boss would agree that the reason was valid, but I took the opportunity to go out to dinner with my crew. The captain invited the entire crew out to dinner and said, "Hey, dinner's on me tonight, so let's all meet downstairs and go out." Right, it was Cinco de Mayo, and I already planned on going out to dinner with him, but when he invited the whole crew, I was like, man, we have to go. So I felt kind of bad telling you, hey, Tony, I'm going to make the podcast, but it was at the same time as the crew dinner. So I said, hey, man, I'm going to miss this podcast, so I'm going to go out with them. But the reason why we went out was crew did a fantastic job handling a medical situation we had en route to our destination. We had 2 medical doctors get involved. We actually had to call the physician on call. And basically what had happened when we had a young male that passed out. I mean, literally collapsed on the floor, and he was non-responsive for a few moments, I should say, and came back to it. And luckily there were 2 medical doctors on board. They were right there to help him. And the flight attendants, it was amazing. It was like we were in training. The way they communicated the information, from the back to the front, up to the cockpit, and everything. And the challenge we had was that we didn't have our Wi-Fi system was down, so they weren't able to communicate through our primary means with the physician on call to relay the medical information to the people that make the the medical decisions for the airline.
Yeah, MedFlight, I think
they had a MetaFlight. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So they had to relay all that information up to us in the cockpit, and then we had to almost do it basically the old-fashioned telesys way, and get over a station, call them up on the radio with a phone patch, and talk to the physician on call. So. We felt that they did a fantastic job. I mean, you should have heard how detailed and very professional and calm and quick. They kept us updated every 5-10 minutes as required.
Yeah.
And we were like, wow, these folks deserve. They did a really good job. They worked really hard. They deserve at least the way that we can show them how much we appreciate what they did.
Yeah.
Just take them out to dinner. So,
yeah. And, that's amazing that your captain also was down for not just taking the crew out for dinner, but to appreciate everything that they did in a situation that is definitely stressful. I mean, you train, but until it actually happens to you, you really don't know, how it's all going to turn out.
Yeah, exactly. And to add a little more detail to the whole situation, the 4 flight attendants back there had just come back from furlough. I mean, they were all freshly trained. I mean, they were they're probably the best one. I mean, not to say that any other flight attendant wouldn't be able to do it, but they had just come through the program.
Their currency,
literally
recency,
within a month, and their recency of experience was there.
Yeah.
So it was very refreshing to know that it can be done the way it's designed and handled, with extreme efficiency.
Now, have you used the new app that the company just released in the last 72 hours? It's called Great Work. Have you heard about this?
No. Were we supposed to?
So, there was an email that came out, I think a couple days ago. There's a new app that you can download from either the Android store or the App Store. I think it's called Great Work. And the email explains on how to set it up on your EFB. But it is solely there to recognize your fellow employees, kind of like an attaboy, And so there's an app right on your tablet now that you can download.
Cool.
And all you got to do is fill it out, put in their, I guess, their name, employee number, or whatever, and you can recognize a fellow employee that has gone above and beyond the call of duty, or maybe they're just doing their job, but they did so in a manner that is, commensurate with the policies and procedures and deserve recognition. So, if you're a Legacy Airlines pilot or employee, for that matter, and you like to recognize a colleague, there's a new app for that.
Yeah, that's great. I like that they're moving to all these apps. Me and the captain just went through our traditional means, which is the company website, and did the nonstop thanks for all 4 of them, and
perfect.
Send them as many points as we can send them, because how often do we get to do that? So and these folks were definitely well deserving of that. So thank you.
It's not often that you hear that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's not often you hear that. So that's great. So it sounds like you had a pretty exciting week last week. And do you have a weekend full of more volleyball?
I have the last one coming up this weekend. So this past weekend was kind of a blitz for me also, because it's not only was it Mother's Day yesterday, so I spent a lot of time preparing for that, but also my wife's birthday is tomorrow. And since I'm on this trip, I kind of have to get everything kind of squared away for just the little celebration that we do with her. So that was nice. That was very busy. But the last weekend of volleyball is coming up. And when I say the last weekend, it's basically the beginning of the end of of the volleyball season. We all have to travel to Vegas for a big tournament out there. So my wife and I and the 2 kids are going to try to do the non-rev thing here this weekend and go play some volleyball in Las Vegas. But crazy as it sounds, there's only like 2 weeks break before they start trying out and going to these other clinics and take where other clubs can take a look at your kid when they play. So there's really no stop, no rest for the weary. We go right into the next season, start looking at other clubs. So, yeah.
Wow, man. My hat's off to you. The fact that you're, able to just keep up with this schedule. I mean,
it's crazy. It's crazy.
My hat's off to you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And congratulations and happy birthday to your wife as well. Please give her my best.
Thank you.
So today's guest, I'm so excited that we were finally able to get our schedules to align and have him on the show. I've known Andi now for quite some time, and I know you recognize him from back in the day at the SandPiper, the airline name that we use here on the show as an alias to our former employer, wholly owned portion of the Legacy family. It's great to have him on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited too. He's a very, very impressive young man. And I'm sure once you listen to his story and everything, everybody will agree with me that he is a special individual. And there is definitely no question that Legacy Airlines has gained a great pilot by hiring this gentleman here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, without further ado, why don't we bring him on to the show? Today's guest started his journey in aviation as a tender-age child growing up in Albania. He immigrated to the United States at the age of 14, where he had to learn the language, the culture, and how to best navigate the educational system to achieve his dream of becoming an aviator. A product of Chicago's public school system, he attended U of I in Urbana, Illinois, where he graduated with honors with a Bachelor's of Science in Aviation Human Factors. Just before graduating, he attended an airline recruitment event in Chicago that turned into a job opportunity with SandPiper. That's the name of the airline we use here on the show to represent the regional carrier based out of Dallas-Fort Worth. There, he began his climb to success in aviation with his work ethic and tenacity, earning himself positions in the company that placed him at the side of both the VP of Flight and the Director of Flight Ops. He now flies for Legacy Airlines on the 737 International Division. Joining us from his home in Miami, Florida, please help us in welcoming to the show, Mr. Andi Lusha. Andi, how the heck are you?
Hey, Tony. Good to be with you. It's an honor to be on your show and share my experiences, and I hope that I can inspire a lot of young aviators out there.
Oh, absolutely. And you've inspired me. We first met back in, was it 2008 maybe? About 2008. Flying together for SandPiper. We were both FOs, and I remember, I was getting off the aircraft. I'm not really sure what the location was, but there were air stairs, I remember. And so after all the passengers got off the plane, I got off the plane with my captain, and here you were coming across. We had never met before, and you were with your captain. And usually at SandPiper, and every regional has a little bit different procedures or standard operating procedures, but at SandPiper, you had to do a post-flight after every single flight unless the outbound crew was there to do their pre-flight before you leave the aircraft. So I was excited to see a crew waiting for the airplane, so that meant I didn't have to do a post-flight. And you came in right away, you put on your safety vest and started doing a post-flight, and you came up to me and looked at me and my captain. Hey, that nose gear looks a little low. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And I thought, well, that's pretty astute. And I was kind of impressed that you really took it serious, and it really did flag your personality and the perception that many people have of your professionalism and leadership. So, thank you for being here today. Thank you for bringing that memory back to me. And talk about an honor to have you on the show. In the intro, we talked about being somebody that is in the 10%. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later because I think that's very important. But let's start from the beginning. Everyone that I have on the show, I always ask them the same question right out the gate. How did you get started in this crazy profession? What age were you when you first looked up and said, I'm going to fly one of those?
Yes. Well, again, Tony, thank you for having me on your show. And actually, on the experience that you and I had on our first encounter, I do recall that was a quick turn. So we had to get going. And I went around, did my walk around, and it was something that I always try to do as a courtesy to inbound crew members at our SandPiper Airline. Most of the time we were crunch on time, so that would give the opportunity to our FOs to go get a meal or get a break or use the restroom. And I appreciate you mentioning that event because I always try to do my best at whatever I have forth. So someone noticing that and appreciating really goes to show that, always give it your best and then, you're always appreciated at the end. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, my aviation journey really started as young as I can remember. I want to say at the age of 5, I remember looking up in the sky and thinking, how cool would it be to be on a seat and fly an airplane? In Albania, as you mentioned on the intro, we grew up in a small farm. Very few air traffic would fly over our town. And that depended on which way the wind blew. We only have one airport. And a lot of times, if the wind blew from the north, the traffic would be over town. Mm. And I took that opportunity to go sit outside, stare at the sky, and just enjoy that beautiful sound that they made. And I could usually pick out when they would make the final turn to line up with the runway. And it was just an enjoyment. And from there on out, I just held on to the dream, hoping that someday it could become a reality.
Yeah. And most of us have, similar stories of being young and having like either a parent or a mentor take us out to the airport to watch airplanes. The fact that your family grew up in a farm in Albania and you just happen to have the flight path of the one runway of the one airport under your farm or over your farm, it was, it's just an amazing thing to hear. It's really, really cool. And for most of us here in the U.S., we're spoiled because we really don't border many countries, right? we have our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south. But when you grow up, in Europe, you have so many countries all around you and so many cultures, and it's just so interesting to hear. I know a fellow migrant to this country, as our listeners that have been listening from day one understand that, you and I have very similar paths, and I can't say that. I can't say that, I grew up in another country and I was looking at airplanes because, for one, I was very young and in Canada and Toronto, airplanes. Yeah, I was like, whatever. Wasn't even paying attention to it. The fact that you can remember that experience at age 5, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and in addition, you did mention something very important, that being in that country, in a farm, and not having the ability to explore my my desire for aviation. We didn't have internet, very few TV channels to learn about aviation. And I actually did not take my first airplane ride until at the age of 14, which was to fly to the United States. So I really, this was just more of a dream and how I envisioned aviation work than learning and having other people share their experiences with me. So that was kind of a childhood dream that did not have any backing. It was more of, okay, this is how I envision it. This is how I thought it would be. And I just hung on to it until I came to the States. And that's when kind of my vision broadened and I learned more about aviation. I learned more about the industry. I learned more about airplanes. But yeah, it was not, and to be honest with you, growing up there, I didn't think that I would ever fly an airplane. It was more of a dream that, I enjoyed looking up in the sky, kind of like a pastime.
Yeah.
But, the educational system in the country, the financial and also the status you're at in most countries prevent you from, doing anything really. As a farmer, that's kind of you're set. You're going to be a farmer, and that's that's how it is.
That's a good point.
Do you remember what? Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, do you remember what kind of airplane it was when you took that flight at 14 years old to? I think you said to United States. What kind of airplane it was?
Yes, I do recall very well. It was on Swiss Air. It was from Tirana, Albania to Zurich, and it was a Dornier, I believe. I don't remember the details, but I know it was a Dornier.
Cool.
And it was about a 2-hour flight to Zurich. And we laid over there to catch our flight from Zurich to Chicago. And that was a 747.
Awesome.
Nice.
I know. And I remember staring at it when we were at the gate. I was mesmerized. And the first thing I was thinking is, how is this thing going to get off the ground?
With all these people, right?
Correct. It looked so massive and so big. I'd never seen anything that close. The only thing I would see was, the closest I could see was maybe 3,000 feet as they were coming in the pattern to land. And I'd never seen such a big airplane. And to me, it was fascinating. Just taking that all in, looking at the airplanes was just something that I said, wow, okay, I think I can do this. I think I'm on my way to achieving my dream.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And, I still have that feeling. You've mentioned that, seeing the monstrosity of an aircraft. I see that at LAX. I think it's gate number 43, where the 787 will park, and it's like feet from the glass, and it's angled such to where like you're looking right into the cockpit, and the thing just looks huge. And I know Chicago has a similar gate where, you're walking, I think it's at the end of maybe K concourse or maybe L concourse, where you're just walking, and all of a sudden you look out the windows and there's a giant airplane sitting right there. And to this day, I mean, here I am, tens of thousands of hours into this career field, and it still gives me chills. Like, man, that's awesome.
It's
cool.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm sure you guys can share the experience when a lot of these islands that we fly to, Caribbean, usually don't have jet bridges, so it's usually air stairs. And every time you do go out there, do the walk around, I usually do take a step back and look at it and say, "Wow, this thing is so cool." It still brings that joy. This is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and so at 14 years old, your entire family migrated to Chicago, as you mentioned. And what kind of brought this change from leaving Albania? Was it just to seek a better life, the ability to have a choice in your future and your career instead of following the expectations of your status in your culture?
So I bet my dad would answer this better, but I could go ahead and say what was going on in his mind. So we're a family of 5. It's my parents, and I have 2 sisters, an older one and a younger one. At the time, my older sister was 16, I was 14, my younger one was 3 at the time. And it's a little bit of everything. I know my parents did want a better opportunity for the kids, of course. They want to have better education, job and everything else. But I think at the time, I cannot imagine what was going through his head, because the way I explain it to people is, imagine your current condition and taking your whole family to the moon. You don't know what's there. You don't know what kind of jobs they're going to be. You don't speak the language. So it's a very difficult process to undertake, especially when you have a whole family. But I know the bottom line was that better future for our family. Of course, my dad wanted a better future for my sisters and I. And then at the time, there was a little bit of conflict, civil unrest at the country. And this kind of made my dad's decision a little easier to just pick up and leave. So there's a lot of factors that went into play. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's called blind faith, isn't it? I think that's what they term it. Blind faith.
Yes. In a way, right. In a way, when you've seen how your life is at the moment, Rob, sometimes you're just going to have to take those big leaps and those major changes to hope for a better future for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you came to the U.S., I know that we've talked before about, you came here not knowing the language. So,
yes.
Another commonality we have together, we came into this country not knowing the language, and you ended up going through the Chicago school system, something that you're very proud of. What can you tell me about that?
Yes. Before I start that, I always share this experience, and I think I told you, flying from Zurich to Chicago, of course, a very long flight. The plane was absolutely packed. Midway through the flight, the whole galley was dark, so everybody was sleeping. The shades were down, and I was so thirsty. I was just very thirsty. I woke up from a nap that I was having, and I went and tracked down one of the flight attendants. And I was trying to tell them that, I was thirsty, but I didn't speak the language. So I was trying to kind of make a sign of I'm thirsty. And they kind of offered me a Coke. And I said, no, So then I I took the flight attendant to the lab and I pointed at the water. And that's how I got water. So speaking of language, and then she was able to get me a glass of water. But speaking of language barriers, yes, it was absolutely very difficult. No language whatsoever. And coming here during that time, of course, you're going through your teenage years. Your hormones are already changing, and you are, of course, experiencing all the other stuff that goes in with your teen years, and not being able to communicate, with not being able to share your experiences or, have friends. It was hard. It was hard. And then, as you mentioned, I did go through Chicago public school system, and I'm very proud of that. A lot of people say that whoever goes through that system is not going to have a good future. And I disagree with that. And I'm one of the stories. I think anywhere you go, it's the work you put in. And that's what counts. But going there has taught me a lot. It was a school that was mostly made of immigrants, meaning the majority of students were immigrants, just like me. But over time, I worked hard. I kept my dream in front of me of wanting to fly. And one of the motivations that I had was that I wanted to get into a good school. I wanted to get into an aviation school, and just kept at it. I had great support faculty over in my high school. They guided me. They encouraged me that every dream is possible. And I had a couple of mentors that always believed in me, and just kept at it.
Yeah. And so you graduated from high school, and you found yourself at a crossroads, as every high school graduate in the U.S. finds themselves. And you had to figure out what the next chapter was going to entail. And I remember you telling me you had a choice between universities, because your end goal, as you just mentioned, was a good education, and an aviation education at that. You never lost sight of that. What transitioned you into your choice in going to U of I?
So yes, I applied to 2 schools and I got accepted at both of them at the time. All I know is that I wanted to fly. And at the time, I learned about Embraer down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I went ahead and applied. And I also learned about U of I's aviation program. And I was leaning more towards U of I. It was 2 hours away, and I wanted to be close to home, and drive back and forth whenever I wanted. Plus the in-state tuition, as the finances weren't there for my parents to really afford out-of-state tuition. And at the time when I received my acceptance letter from Embraer, I was really excited. I'm like, okay, this is happening. I'm almost there. But after running, doing my homework, running the numbers, it felt that it was a little bit out of reach. And while I was still waiting for U of I kind of lost hope that I thought maybe U of I wasn't going to happen. So I kind of started making my decision to go to Embry-Riddle. Oh. And just at the last minute, U of I gave me my acceptance letter. And that's when I said, this is it. This is the school I wanted to go to. And it's been nothing but great experience after that.
Yeah. And so at Champaign-Urbana was where you ended up.
Correct. Yes.
How was that program? You had the program of aviation human factors. Was it something that was a challenge for you, or did you just enjoy it?
It was a little bit of both. I always, at least my personal experiences, I always tell people that flying is fun, is great, it's just everything you imagine it to be. Learning how to fly can be a little bit difficult. So I can share both experiences where I've been happy. That was mostly when, you had a good check ride, got a rating. But then, you've had bad days when, you weren't grasping the concept of a maneuver, or you were having trouble with some of the coursework. But overall, I think I'm the type of person that I always seek support. I always seek other people's advice. So I utilized everything that U of I had to offer to overcome all of these barriers. And at the end of the day, I think it made me a little stronger. It's a process that I think everybody shares in the end. But I always tell people it always takes me twice the amount of work that an average person would to learn something. And that's just a personal thing I think I have. Most people say that's not true, but as you know, Tony, I try to be a perfectionist and want to make sure that I do it right and not just cruise by it.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I never learn, so you're way ahead of me.
You still can't get right, Rob.
I still can't get it right. What school you went, by the way? No, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never learn.
Well,
I just follow the crowd.
Well,
what's he doing? That's what I'm doing.
It's funny you mentioned that, because at the end of the day, I still feel that way, right? You're always thinking that I'm never that type of person that says, well, now I know everything. You cannot teach me anything, especially being in our industry. We know that's not the attitude you want to have. Right. I'm always saying if someone else can teach it to me better or has a different way of explaining something, please do so. No matter how well I think I know something, there's always room for improvement. So
definitely,
correct.
Definitely in this industry.
Yeah, in this industry, the day you stop learning is the day you need to start hanging it up, because you have to have that mindset that there might be a better way of doing this, or what can I take this? What technique can I learn? Even from my captains that I fly with on a regular basis on the flight line. They say it all the time. My FO that I flew with last week just taught me this. Check it out. And I'm, oh, okay. So then now my captain's teaching me this. And now maybe in a week or so, I'll go fly with a captain and I'll be like, hey, the last captain told me about this. Check. Oh, okay. So we're constantly evolving. our skill set. And I think more flight hours you get under your belt, more experiences you're privy to in this industry and in this career progression, it absolutely makes a difference, especially if you're paying attention and you take it in and you file it away and you're, oh, good technique.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a very good point, because I think the earlier you learn this, whether it's school or training or whatever other industries you're involved in, the better I think you're off. Because constantly, I think I go to work and I'm never home to say after a 4-day trip or whatever that, oh man, I didn't learn anything today, or I did everything perfect because I'm always perfect. So and that's the beauty about this job. Sometimes, when you learn something and say, wow, I wish I would have known that earlier, and you're kind of mad at yourself how you did not have this information available to you earlier. So you're right. We were always trying to perfect our techniques and make ourselves better.
Yeah. And I just wish I could learn that in terms of my interpersonal relationships.
You and I both.
Yeah, you got it. So you graduated from UNI with honors. Absolutely goes against what you just said, that it takes you twice as long and you have to work twice as hard, but yet you see the rewards from that. To graduate with honors from the University of Illinois is a feat that not many people can say they've done. So congratulations on that. I'm not surprised, to be honest with you, having known you for so many years. But that was a really interesting transition. And when I found out that you didn't even have to go through the pain and suffering of most CFIs out in the country, having to be in the right seat of a Cessna with a student who is constantly trying to kill you. We jest, but that's really the attitude that you have to have in order to maintain a safe environment and keep the learning process going. You didn't even have to do any of that. And it's an amazing set of circumstances that allowed you to go from graduation to a class date at a regional carrier. How did that all happen?
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate all the kind words. The way I look at things is every time you complete a task, you're on to the next one. Sometimes my sister and most of my friends that know me tell me, well, sit back, enjoy what you just accomplished. I'm like, okay, that's in the past now. We're going to go on to the next task. So I think that's a fault that I have, that I just need to sit back and enjoy kind of what I've accomplished up to that point. But I think as you know, our industry hasn't been very flattering in the past couple decades. We had 9/11, and I had started training in 2003. That's when all the legacies had furloughed, and there were no jobs to be found. At the time, it was a very, very bad picture in the aviation industry. And I remember there were many people that were telling me, this isn't the time to enter, you should pick a different field. This is something that, but I look past that. I'm like, I'm not doing this for a job, or I'm not doing this for money or to show off. This is more than just that for me. I'm doing this for me. And this is something that I've been dreaming ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
So I always tuned everything out and focused on my goal. So with that being said, when it was a week before graduation, going back to my transition from school to a job, a week prior to graduation, I was roaming around our aviation dispatch room, and I saw a flyer that said the SandPiper was going to have a recruiting event in 2 days in Chicago. And I was going to come home that weekend. It was a Saturday. I was going to come home that weekend to bring some of my stuff, because I was moving in a week after my finals, and I couldn't do it in one trip. So I said, oh, that would be really neat. I am going to attend this recruiting event. And I had a buddy of mine, and I said, hey, let's go attend this. Let's go hear what they have to say. We're not going in there for a job. And he agreed. He's like, okay, I'll go with you. That Saturday, we went to the hotel room. It was at 9 a.m., the hotel banquet where they were going to have this recruiting event. And they gave the little spiel for about 45 minutes about who SandPiper was and what kind of candidates they were looking for and how they have bases all over the country. And after the event had concluded, my buddy said, hey, let's leave. I'm like, no, I'm going to go talk to one of the recruiters. I just want to thank them for their presentation and tell them how informative they were. He's like, okay, fine. So I stood in line on one of the lines that they had kind of a personal questions and answer session. And I approached the recruiter and I told her, I said, thank you very much. You guys were very informative. I really enjoyed everything you guys had to say. And maybe someday I'd hope to apply and get hired by you guys. And then she said, oh, would you like to interview right now? We're doing interviews on the spot. And then I told her, well, I'm not prepared. I don't have a resume. And I told her I just learned about this 2 days ago, and I have finals all next week. So I didn't really come here for an interview. Well, she said, well, I tell you what, when will you be free? And I'm like, well, the following Monday. I said I should finish my last finals on Friday, and the following Monday I should be able to to finish everything. She's like, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you email me and we'll set you up with something and we can figure out when to have you over in Dallas. And I said, okay. I thought she was just being nice. So I went to school later that evening. This was a Saturday. And around 7 p.m., I looked at my schedule and I said, okay, yeah, Friday is my last final. I was going to drive home that following Saturday. And I tell her Monday I'll be available. I emailed her at 7 p.m. At 7:15 p.m., she sends me an email back with an itinerary and a packet of what to prepare for an interview. And she says, great, we'll see you on Monday in Dallas. And this was like December 15th or something like that. It was the week right after finals.
2007.
Yeah,
and
what year?
2007.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. And at the time, I remember when she was asking me about interview, and I said, well, I have to be honest with you. I don't even meet your qualifications. At the time, they were requiring 1,000 hours and 100 multi. And she said, well, how many hours do you have? I said, 300 hours. And she's like, oh, that's okay. We like you guys. She meant from our school. You guys always have no trouble with our training.
Wow.
So, yeah, I emailed her. And again, that following Monday after my finals week, I took a Sunday flight over to Dallas. And there I was interviewing for the job. And Tony, they hired me. However, I only had 17 multi. And I believe the FAA required 50 at the time. So they said, go get the additional time, photocopy that, fax it to us, and we'll put you on the next class. And that's exactly what I did.
Wow. So you went out, found a flight school or a place where you can rent a twin and went up and just built time.
Yeah, actually, my buddy and I, he was a CFI, I think it is. And him and I shared it. He gave it to me as dual given, and he logged it in as dual given, and I logged it in as dual receipt.
Multi-engine instructor.
MEI. I'm sorry. Yes, it's been so long.
MEII.
MEII, correct.
That's it.
There you go, Rob. It's been so long. So we split the cost. I know it was a huge expense, but it was for the job. Yep.
That's awesome.
We just had Jerry on last show on episode 77, and he was telling us about his ab initio program that he went through. He got hired on at Mesa with 0 hours, and they went through the flight school. Those kind of, from the beginning programs really don't exist anymore. They've progressed into what we now call the cadet program. The cadet program, same thing. If you can apply and get accepted into one of these cadet programs at a legacy carrier, you can, for all intents and purposes, have 0 hours and go through the program, follow their mentorship, their curriculum, their criteria, and get hired on. Now, obviously, FAR 117, in the wake of the Colgan Air crash that happened in Buffalo all those years ago, changed everything. And now we have to have an ATP minimum in order to work at a Part 121 carrier. That's the FAR Part 121 carrier, or airline, U.S. airline carrier. You have to have an ATP rating, regardless of what seat you sit in. But at the time, when you and I, and even Rob, went through the program, we were commercial pilots. That's all you needed to be. That was the minimum, the commercial rating. And a commercial rating with 300 hours and 50 multi got you there. So, wow, that's an amazing story. We've seen how the opportunity when you're a low-time pilot to go right from training right into training again without that kind of stagnant period of, I got to build time. And a lot of times what happens, and we didn't really talk about this on the last show, is your instructors, if they're sitting there after a while, if you really don't have a passion for teaching, it becomes kind of tedious. And those instructors lose a little bit of that motivation, and the attitude starts to grow. And then when you show up at a regional airline initial ground school, sometimes it's kind of a shock because you've been out of that mindset of training, or you're receiving the training. And so to go from a training environment, a low time, 300 hours, and then go right into long-term initial ground for an airline, sometimes it's kind of beneficial, wouldn't you say?
I couldn't agree with you more, Tony. At the time, most of my instructors were what you had mentioned. They had been there for years and years. They had accumulated many hours, not because they chose to. They just weren't getting hired at the regionals at the time. Nobody was hiring. So as far as that motivational factor, I did have a couple of encounters in my school where the instructor was kind of checked out and you had to learn on your own. That kind of ended towards the end of my training because the newer instructors were coming in. They were more eager to teach and build time. So that kind of changed. But yes, it was very beneficial. At our school, we did a lot of sim type work. And I think that gave me an absolute edge over everything. I recall when I went through the training or when I went through the interview process, for people such as myself that were low time, they would send you through a jet transition course, it was called back then. It was about maybe 10 hours that they purchased. The company paid for it. And I think, and then you had a contract of 2 years. If you left before that, then you kind of had to pay the difference. Right. But I remember the recruiter told me, she's like, the sim at the time, we also did sim rides. And I remember mine was in an ATR when in the evaluation sim ride. I remember the instructor said, the recruiter said, we normally send guys with your experience through this jet transition course. However, we don't think you need it. And I said, well, if you don't think I need it, then I won't take it. She's like, okay, yeah, we'll sign you up for the next class. And I'm like, well, I'll take your recommendation. That was kind of a 2-week thing where you do ground school and a little bit of sim work. Yeah. And they would sign you off and tell the airline, okay, he's ready and he can go on to this course. Because I recall we had a class of 40, and I recall that nearly half of them did not make it at the end. Some washed out during the ground process, others washed out during the sim process, and a couple washed out in IOE. Oh, wow. So it was a very intense. Recall, do you guys remember when we still had the orals and the check rides? I mean, it was really intense at the time.
Yeah. We saw grown men cry. because they're like, I just got a pink slip, my career is over. No, you're not. Your career is not over as long as you learn from it and move forward. But still, we've said this 100 times before on the show. It's like, you look to your left, look to your right. One or both of those guys aren't going to make it, and if they make it, you're probably not going to make it. So study up.
Speaking, Tony, I want to share this. Speaking of a pink slip, at the time when I went through the interview process, my buddy and my school were like, "Oh, don't do it, man. You're so low time. You're going to wash out, and then you're going to have a pink slip, and no other regional is going to ever touch you again."
Yeah.
They're like, "You need to go fly, be instructor or go fly somewhere else, get some experience." And I said, no. She said I could do it, and I'm going to do it. So I went all in, and luckily it was a positive experience. Now, I don't remember any of it because I was so nervous and everything was
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur. I was like, sometimes I wake up and be like, where am I? What am I doing? It was more of, and I'm sure you guys know you have the same experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rob did too. We've talked about this before. Tenacity and attitude go a long way. It really do.
Definitely does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, having that attitude anywhere you go, I'm ready to learn. Please, if I know something and you have a better way of teaching me, please do so. And you find that people do take their time, if you need the extra time to learn or the extra sim session, and they do help you.
Yeah, they really do. And not, even though, we kind of paint the picture that at the regional airline, the training is more difficult. And yes, it is, because it's new. It's a new experience for most people. Now, if you've already been to a regional and then you're coming over from another regional and you're doing a transition, it's no big deal because you've already experienced the initial shock of, oh crap, this is really fast paced, which is really the issue. It's new, it's fast paced. They don't have time to sit there and coddle you and really spoon feed you the answers here. You have to do the work, and it's hard work. It's a lot of information. I mean, how many manuals did we used to carry around in those kit bags? Like 40 pounds worth of books and JEP charts and you had to know it, or at least have it quickly accessible and know how to find it. So yeah, it was a different time. Your tenacity got you through it, and you ended up on the Embraer 145. Was that the first aircraft that you were hired onto?
That is correct. I always tell people that I'm not as smart as I look or I appear. So I think, Tony, you've kind of overhyped me there.
Not at all.
But I didn't know regional airplanes existed until I was hired at SandPiper at the time. So I thought they were all made by Boeing or Airbus, to be honest with you. It shows how clueless I was. All I cared was about flying.
I didn't know what an Embraer was when I got there.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
I had no clue.
Brazil? They make airplanes in Brazil?
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Exactly.
What? And this has a Rolls Royce motor in it, or
like
Allison
the car?
Doesn't Boeing make everything, right? So I'm very. I can admit it because a lot of people, I think maybe some of your listeners would go in there and you have a lot of experts that can tell you everything about any type of airplane you ask them for. I don't know. I just know as much as, what I fly right now. I couldn't tell you anything else, but I know going through the aviation program, I had some of my buddies name everything under the sun. And at the time, I didn't even know who made our airplane that I was flying. Later on, I found out it was a Piper Archer, and then I learned about what a Piper was. So, but that's not to say that you'll be a failure just because you don't know this information. I think to me, having the passion of flying goes way beyond the knowledge that you know. I can actually share you a quick story about our hiring process. At the time, when the SandPiper would hire, they would put you in a room, and kind of all the people that were going to interview that day were in that room. And I was pretty sure that room was being watched or tracked or something. And there was this guy who came in, He did not have a tie on. His shirt was unbuttoned, and he was actually showing some chest hair. And I was like, man, this guy is pretty confident that he's going to get this job. And I remember I was sitting in the desk all scared about, who's going to interview. And at the time, if you guys recall, what they did was they put you in the room and they would call you one by one as they interviewed you. First you did your tech interview, then you did your HR. And if you passed those two, they invite you to do the sim ride in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So I remember this guy, he sat on the desk, not in the chair, and was swinging his hair. And he was talking about how many hours he had, all the jets he has flown. He's like, yeah, I went to one of those recruiting events. And they said, yeah, we'll hire you right on the spot, but you just need to come to Dallas so you can do the formality of an interview. And, you'll have no problem. I have 3,000 of that. I've flown on this jet. I've flown on that. And I was looking at him. I'm like, how are they going to hire me when this guy, he's the best. This guy is going to get the job. I kid you guys not. They pulled him out first. 2 minutes later, he comes back. And if they tell you, go grab your bags, you're going home. He comes and grabs his bags. And he was the first one to leave. And it goes to show you that the attitude and the bragging and everything and his appearance, they overlooked at all that experience and said, you know what? No, we don't want this guy to be stuck with another guy because it's not going to be good.
Exactly. They teach you this in the private pilot course. I think principles of learning, hazardous attitudes. One of the first lessons, macho.
Yes.
Your story is right on point. Rob and I are kind of sitting here smiling and laughing as you're telling the story because we've seen it as instructors. We've seen it as check airmen.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this industry, when you have the responsibility of all the lives that you will carry in your career and all of the equipment that you are either responsible for or jointly responsible for as either PIC or second in command SIC, the attitude is everything. And at the end of the day, if you have an FAA license in your back pocket, you can fly an airplane. Okay, you've jumped through the hoops. You've done all the written tests that you could get your hands on to get here. That's fine, but are you going to be a jerk or an a-hole? Am I going to be okay flying with you for a week? That's really when you're interviewed and you get past all those initial hurdles with the HR interview and the technical interview and the sim portion and the medical portion, somewhere in this interview process, especially at a regional carrier, you're going to be interviewed by an actual line pilot or check airman. And really what they're looking for, they're going to ask you some technical questions, sure, but that's really their way to judge, are you an a-hole? That's really what it all comes down to. Yeah. Am I going to be okay flying with you cramped into a phone booth-sized cockpit for a few days? Or am I going to want to kill you after the first 10 minutes because you're driving me
annoying.
Nuts?
Yes.
That's really what, something that I wish I knew early on. Simply because it would have calmed me down a little bit in the process, and not to follow the status quo as you didn't. If you would have listened to your peers when you were in training, you probably would have stayed behind, went through the expense of getting your flight instructor ratings and going through building your time, because you had to follow the norm, the status quo. And instead, you listened to your instincts and you thought outside of the box and you weren't going to let the noise coming from around you dictate your decision-making process. You knew, you had the confidence, and you're humble about it, which, again, goes to prove that you were doing the right thing and following the right path. And here you are. You ended up at a regional carrier, and we met in the process. Took you a while to upgrade, as it did myself and Rob as well, because cyclical nature of the industry, a post 9/11 industry, goes up and it goes down. We saw furloughs, we saw bankruptcies, we saw mergers, we saw base closures and equipment retirements all over at SandPiper at the time. And that did not stop you, did it? You ended up in the office getting some positions. How did that start? Here you were an FO, flying the line in Chicago, being able to drive back and forth to work, which is great, especially at the beginning of your career. And you ended up taking an opportunity to get a position in a special assignment. That's how it all started, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Tony, I've been very fortunate. I think I've come across many individuals, work colleagues outside of work that have really given me kind of inspiration and motivation to do more, you know. And one of the things is with SandPiper, I really enjoyed the work ethics. Some of our captains, as you know, had been there a long time. That was due to 9/11 that kind of stopped the flow and the hiring at many of the legacies. And at the time, it was considered one of the best regional carriers out there. And they took the pride. And I enjoyed that. I think I took the pride as being at one of the top carriers. And I always wanted to do more. I wanted to get involved, how I can, help people, how I can help our work colleagues, and how I can be of service to the company. And I recall at the time we were going through chief transitions. One of our chiefs at the time flowed to the legacy carrier. And so a new chief came in. And I had flown with this new chief before. We had a good rapport. And this assignment was only by invitation only, because it wasn't unofficial for pay purposes. The chief said, "I would like for you to do this position." And I was like, "Oh, this is a great honor. I mean, he believes that I could undertake such a huge task. Of course I'm going to do it. Of course, you've got my full loyalty in it." And it started off as just a couple of days here and there, kind of learning the system, the ins and outs, and it became to almost a full-time position while I was still flying the line. And I did that for about 3 years. I was still an FO. And also, one other point I wanted to make why I wanted to do something different was, as you know, being an FO kind of a long time on the same equipment, same base, there was no movement. You kind of wanted to mix things up a little bit. And I like a little bit of challenge. While it was great, it was comforting. You didn't have to do anything but put the gear up and then put it down when you were asked to put it down.
Give or take.
But give or take, right. But I wanted a little bit of excitement, a little bit of challenge in the mix. And so it was a great honor to be asked. And I said, absolutely, I'll take this position. And as you know, you're dealing with pilots that can be both a positive and a negative experience. So the job in itself, while I enjoyed every bit of it, it was challenging at the same time. I did that for about 3 years because our company started having a lot of movement. A new position opened up in Dallas that was also by invitation only. And the person that was doing it flowed to Legacy. And so I was asked to undertake this new position. And I believe they enjoyed the work I did and the work ethics and the time that I put in. And again, it was a great honor. I said, absolutely, you're trusting me to do this and be kind of on the inner circle of flight operations. And it was an eye-opener because a lot of times we don't see the inner workings of the company, but actually being a part of it and seeing how everything comes together, it amazes me to this day how any airline functions in that matter, because there's so many components that come in. It's like a jet engine. There's so many components that have to work, and everything has to be synchronized to produce the outcome that you need. And the same thing with the airline. It is such a complex operation and so many components that come in. And it was just an eye-opener. And I got to appreciate what I did more. And again, it was something that gave me challenge, and I like a good challenge, even though I would complain at times saying how it was difficult and it was nerve-wracking, but at the same time, it was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah. And we'll be right back to hear more about Andi's journey in aviation. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, we've been talking to Andi Lusha here and hearing his inspiring story on how he came to the country at the age of 14 and had to learn the language, the culture, the education, ended up determined to become an aviator. So everything he did led him to position himself to be on a fast track to get a job at a mainline carrier. And we have found out that that is exactly, through chance, through tenacity, and through hard work, that is exactly what has happened. Now, Andi, we talked about your leadership roles with SandPiper, how you've always kind of positioned yourself to seize every opportunity that has presented itself to you. You know, we talked about the 10%, and Rob, you recall the 10% story? Just
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick one on that. I flew with an FO at one point later in my career at SandPiper, and he had an attitude not unlike the one of the Mr. Macho you were talking about earlier. So here he was on the flight line, and he's like, "Wow, you know, I've been here almost 2 years, and I haven't upgraded yet. This is BS, and I put my application out to every single major out there, and no one's calling me, and it's because I'm a white male." And I was like, wow, okay. So I just kind of let him dig his own hole, and about second leg of the day on first day of flying, I kind of looked at him and I said, "Can I give you some advice?" And his ears shot up, and he was like, yeah. I'm like, "I'm going to guess that you've been flying with senior captains here at SandPiper." And he's like, "Well, yeah, I can hold a line. I'm flying with senior captains." I said, "Yeah, I can tell because you sound just like them. You're complaining about how long you've been here, which is a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things." I'm like, "What, are you 20-something?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "So you got 40 years in this industry. You're only on your first 2? Okay." And I said, "The problem with you is from my previous career as a wholesale manager for a big box retailer, I was in charge of hiring, and I would look at applications throughout the season, and I'd have 300 or 400 applications on my desk. It was my job to whittle them down to the top 10%. And those are the ones that I passed on to my boss, and they would look at them and start calling in for interviews." I said, "The common denominator here is you want to be in the top 10%. And what that means is your application in reference to aviation, if you have the hours and the experience, well, hey, that's great. Anybody can have the hours and experience. And I'm going to venture to guess that the majority of pilots out there looking for work have more hours than you. So, okay, you met the minimum qualifications. Good for you. But you're in the 90 percentile, meaning most of the people are just like you. Now, it's the 10% that I would pull off the stack and put on the short stack. Those are the people that have all the little extra bullet points, the volunteering, the human resource experience. Maybe you're a line pilot, maybe you're a CFI. It doesn't matter. If you're doing all the little extra things, working in the office, trying to learn what that actually entails, how to run a company or a business or charter operator. Are you in the flight department? What are you doing? And yeah, some people think, well, you're just drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, well, that's easy to kind of be hypercritical of someone saying that they're just, for the company. It's easy to put that label on someone. But what's not easy is to constantly be learning and constantly moving forward. As you mentioned, Andi, a little earlier, you're constantly looking at the next step in your profession, in your career. You know, we've all three of us here on the show today can say that we've been in that tier of that 10% where we've worked in the office or we've done the check airman duties where you're basically an instructor for the airline to make sure that, you know, everybody's get their paperwork in order and they're ready for IOE and you know, ready to be out there on their own. Those responsibilities are the extra effort that you need to show in order to really have a successful progression. Now, you don't need to do it. You could get along just fine, but now you're in line with everybody else. So to be in that top 10%, the fact that I saw that in you in a blink of an eye on a turn when we first met, I was like, man, this guy's sharp. It really does put you in that category. And I know you're humble and you're like, you know, but it's true. And that's really the best advice. Your story emulates that. It's the best advice you can give someone who's coming up, who wants to be a successful aviation professional. And it's right there. Aviation professional. You got to give it your all. You got to do that extra stuff. You got to volunteer your time. You've got to not be afraid to learn an aspect that's going to be a little more work, and it could be a jeopardy event for you. But it puts you in that position to be invited to be an assistant to the VP of flight, to be invited to do something that may not even have a title, but at least that's that bullet point that you can put on your resume that in the future, when you're out there, there's a downturn and maybe you're looking for another carrier to fly for, that's what they're going to look at.
Yeah, I think, Tony, you make very good points there. And I think one of the things I want to emphasize is that I didn't do these things where I had a checklist that I said, okay, I need to follow this and then that, and then go here and then do that. I think, I know we've known people in our industry that have done certain things like check airmen, because I want to get hired by a legacy or I want them to pick me out. So they've done it for the wrong reasons. And a lot of times it may not work out the way they planned it. So I think, at least for me, they turn kind of into hobbies and challenges that I pursued. It's not that if I check this box, I'm going to get X, Y, Z in return. And I think I do this on most of my things, on anything that I do in life. And of course, some reward would be welcome. You know, of course, everything that we do is we want positive outcomes, but it may not be the case. And at the end of the day, I'm happy with what I did because I enjoyed it, or it was something that I undertook for personal reasons and not to get recognized or to make more money. Or I truly feel that if you do something that you enjoy and you're passionate about, the money will later come. And most people follow the money first, and then they find out that it doesn't work out the way they do. So, but I'm here to tell you that these plans, while Tony, again, they're very flattering, but I'm here to say that life, sometimes you wake up in the morning and takes a turn that you didn't expect. You know, it could be positive or negative. And I think I'm very blessed to some of the outcomes that I've had. And of course, there've been challenges along the way that haven't worked out the way I expected. But overall, I enjoyed every part of it.
Yeah. What would you say was one of the biggest challenges while at SandPiper and out on the flight line?
Well, there have been many challenges. I think one of the challenges has been kind of getting used to the airline industry and the schedules and the work. Because like I mentioned it to you, going into this, I had no idea how any of this worked, how the job was. I just wanted to fly. So adjusting to the reserve life at the time, right when I got hired, about a couple months later, the SandPiper at the time furloughed. I was not furloughed. I was able to hang on, but I was the bottom guy. in Chicago for about a year and a half. And that was a little bit challenging. The reserve rules were not that great. So I ended up every time I had a reserve day, I was out there flying. And at the time, if you recall, we'd have 6-day trips. If you had 6 days of reserve, you'd start with a turn and they just keep tagging on and on. So I think getting used to that, and for me personally, is later on I started preparing every time for 6-day trips. Even though it was a turn, my bag was a 6-day trip bag.
Yep.
So I think once I overcame that and I showed up with the attitude that I was going to fly a 6-day trip. If it was 2 days, hey, that's a bonus. I get to go home earlier. But I think then I became a little calmer. So getting used to the airline schedule, that was kind of one of the most difficult things, I think, that took some time to adjusting.
What was your most rewarding experience that you had at SandPiper that brought you just pure joy and, elation, if there ever was one?
Yeah. Well, I think our work colleagues, I have to say, I've made so many friendships, such as you, Tony, that we still keep in contact with. And most of our work colleagues have had the opportunity to flow. However, there are still some that chose to finish their career off at SandPiper. Mm-hmm. But I think just gaining all that experience, it's like every person I meet, I always say, what can this person teach me today? How can they inspire me? And it's been kind of a blessing because everyone offers something. Now, not all experiences can be positive. I'm sure Tony mentioned earlier about the a-holes of the group, they belong to. But at the end of the day, even the a-holes, you kind of get the experience of what not to do. How could I handle something better in the future if I was in that position? So work colleagues, I think, would have to be the most rewarding thing, Rob.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great question, Rob. So 11 years at SandPiper, and you had the opportunity to follow this illustrious, at the time, groundbreaking flow through to mainline. And here you are at Legacy Airlines, 737 pilot. And did you actually move? Because I understand you're now based in Miami. That's a big leap and change from being at home in Chicago, and now here you are at mainline in Miami on reserve, for at least at the beginning of your time here. Was the transition difficult for you?
Well, I want to start out by saying 11 years may sound like a long time, and I know most of our colleagues had to stay longer than that before they had the opportunity to flow or get hired.
Yeah.
But I want to say that 11 years flew by so fast that I think looking back at it, if you had told me you're going to be stuck for 11 years, it was something that was going to scare me. But looking back, I'd say, wow, those 11 years were amazing. The experience was amazing and everything in between.
Blink of an eye.
But now going back, yes, blink of an eye with, unbelievable experience that we can carry on throughout the rest of our career. So going back to flow, yes, I did move to Miami. I feel like it's some of the best flying that I've ever done, and I think that I could ever do. The Caribbean, the Central America, the South America. I mean, it is, you go to work. I feel like when I'm home, I'm working, and when I'm at work, I'm on vacation and time off, because I go to work to have time off.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys can share that experience, because when you're home, you got to mow the lawn, you got to do this, you got to do that. And when you're away at work, it doesn't feel like work. It's just unbelievable. So yes, I moved there and I've been happy. Initially, we had the choice of LAX, DCA, LaGuardia, or Miami, and I chose Miami. And I thought maybe I was going to be there 6 months to a year until Chicago was going to, open up and have more first officers. But I loved it so much that I said, nope, I'm not. I'm going to stay here. And I moved permanently, bought a place down there, and I love it. Love every bit of it.
Yeah, and I have a special place in my heart for Miami. I really do. As you notice, I changed my background here on our Zoom call.
Does that say 26? Because that's where my house is. It's a block away.
Oh, really?
It's like 11 or something.
Yeah, it's on 26. Does that say 26?
It looks like it says 11. I can hardly see it. No, that's a window through it.
That's the window right there. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
That, you know where that is? That's at the Confidant.
Okay, that's nearby where I live.
Is it?
I'm just a block away from the beach and right there, living the dream.
Yeah. It really, truly is a vacation for you then.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love Miami. It's, let's see if I can.
Sometimes we get captains from different bases, and when they fly through there, they just absolutely love it. And everybody says 737 Miami is the best flying in the system.
What?
Wow.
Well, okay. I don't know about that, but no, definitely. I really, truly do enjoy the Miami flying, the Central America flying out from there, the Caribbean. It really is an enjoyable place to go, and especially if you have a good crew. Oh, forget about it. Now, I noticed your background you have there. And before we kind of wrap up your journey and start getting into the Q&A, you're pretty. I'd say professional photographer. I've been following your social media and all of. You and I both have this affinity for photography. You absolutely blow me out of the water when it comes to some of your images that you're able to capture. Is that skyline behind you one of the images you captured from the flight line?
Yeah, if some of your listeners and viewers are able to see this, this was a red eye from Las Vegas to Miami, and it was about 3 a.m. We were just coming up over New Orleans. There at the bottom, you can see the city. Mm-hmm. And we were at 41,000 feet. That was at the height of the pandemic. We maybe had 2 passengers in the back. And it was super smooth flight. And to the naked eye, it looks like a cloud. Of course, the radar is not painting anything. And the captain goes, "Man, what is that cloud there? I mean, we're not showing anything on the radar." I said, "Oh, that's not a cloud, my friend. Let me show you what that is." So I pull out my camera and I set it on a 15-second shutter mode, pressed it away, and it captured it. And bam, and he saw it. "Oh my God, wow." And I said, "Yeah, the naked eye wouldn't be able to see that, but the camera with a long enough shutter exposure, you're able to see it." So I enjoy photography. I enjoy aviation. Photography is kind of my hobby outside of aviation, although I say photography is work and aviation's hobby. So sometimes I get too mixed, but they're all mixed together. I do both at the same time. And some of the shots, the night shots, are the most challenging ones. As you can see here, the Milky Way galaxy. Yeah. You have to have perfect conditions. You have to point it a certain way. And you have to have super smooth flight to be able to capture that. Yeah, and I've done it many times.
I was just about to ask him, how can you have a 15-second exposure and not be completely blurry? You must have been like flying on glass.
So many times, correct. Many times to take such a challenge, such a photo, a lot of photographers will tell you that you need to try a lot, many tries. And I must have taken maybe over 50 shots. And I take 50 and then I go through which one was the best capture one. Yeah. Because as soon as the aircraft has a little bit of a ripple, the whole thing is ruined. So you just have to keep taking it until hope that one of them was just perfect.
Yeah. For 15 seconds, it's steady.
Yeah. Here's the trick too, Rob. If it's beyond 15 seconds, you can actually see the stars move. So you're going to have the stars, you're going to have the trail of the stars, and it looks like it's blurry, but it's the actual movement of the Earth.
So beyond 15, you'll get that.
Yeah, 15 seconds is the sweet spot, unless you got fancy equipment that moves with the stars. They have those expensive stuff where you put your camera and it tracks the sky and it moves along with the sky. So
what camera are you using for that photo behind you?
I'm using Canon. I'm a Canon guy. I've been Canon for 20 years, ever since the first digital camera came out. But I'm using a Canon. It's a PowerShot G7X Mark II.
Nice.
Now, it's just your basic, it fits in your pocket. The reason it's small, but it's just your basic manual
point and shoot
camera. Point and shoot, but with manual features that you can have manual, right?
Does that the Mark II that has is that an SLR with the exchangeable lenses or?
No. It looks like a point and shoot one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it with me, but the reason why I like this because I have the SLR with interchangeable, but those are too big to carry.
Yeah.
This specific one you can fit in your pocket, put in your kid bag. It's really compact, and that's kind of I don't use my phone.
Good in between
pictures.
For traveling and all that stuff.
Correct. I think taking pictures with your phone, it's kind of an insult, but
hey,
you only do that if you have no other camera and you need to prove to somebody that you took that picture.
Yeah. Actually, before digital photography, I actually studied photography in school, and we've kind of talked about this. Andy and I've talked about. I have a bachelor's in film production, and so I was going to be a cinematographer. That was my thing, and so this was all on celluloid film, not digital. And when digital came out, I was very hesitant because I was one of those, I'm a purist. If it's not, a good film that I can touch and develop myself. And I even had a dark room when I was in high school. I had built my own dark room in the garage. I mean, I was truly, there I was with my black and white Omega C 700 enlarger or something like that, or C100 enlarger. And anyway, so I never really went to digital. I ended up with a Panasonic. This is first generation. And then I think I had a Canon ELPH at one point in my kit bag. And then, the iPhones were in my back pocket. And as I've progressed through all the iPhones that I've ever owned, and here I am now with the 12 Pro, and I like it. I like the feature on there and the fact that it fits in my pocket. Now, I miss not having the control. And I think, that's what really has me mesmerized by your photos. I could tell that they're done just so well, and you've manipulated the light and all the filters that you then use in post. And some of these photos, I look at them and I go, damn, Andy, come on. This is awesome.
Our cameras, phone cameras have come a long way. Actually, they do pretty well. But there's certain things like the night sky and
can't do it.
You can't do it. So
didn't have a big enough lens on it.
Correct. And so I'd like to share those experiences, with other work colleagues, and it's usually you'll find that 99% of the guys you fly with and gals, of course, love photography, and that's a great topic to talk about, because everybody just starts off with politics. I'm like, oh no, let me show you this picture. Let's talk about photography instead.
Let me show you this picture first.
Yeah,
Section 37 cinched it for me. Now work.
All right. Let's not talk about politics. So it's a great conversation starter and a great topic to spend 4 days. And I've had guys that I tell them, oh, can I have that picture? I'm like, yeah, it's yours. Oh, how much do you want for it? No, it's all yours. I'm glad that you're a fan.
That's awesome.
That's cool,
awesome.
Man.
Yeah, and if you're willing to share a few with our viewers, we'll put some on the website.
Absolutely.
After the show. So
you can link my social media account, and they can look at them there.
Yes,
absolutely.
We will absolutely do that. Just to wrap up the journey portion of the interview, here you are at Legacy. Been here now 2.5 years, I think we said.
Correct, yes.
Has it been exactly what you expected, or is there more to it?
I think it's been beyond what I expected. I can't describe it. I think, like I said, every day it's like going on vacation. At first, it was challenging. Like I said, I was a perfectionist. I wanted to make sure I did everything right, and finish the training successful and kind of merge with the new pilot group as well as I could. But other than that, oh my God, it's been wonderful. Our work colleagues are amazing, and it's been such an eye opener to see again how this giant airline is able to just work.
Yeah,
and it's phenomenal.
Is huge.
And we're part of it. We're part of these gears that are turning this airline and moving it forward, and it's been phenomenal.
Yeah. So what it probably, if you had to surmise one or two moments that have been the biggest challenges for you throughout your aviation journey, what would they be?
Challenges. I mean, I wake up every day thinking it's going to be a challenge, Tony, just to be honest with you. I'm like, what is the world going to hurl at me today? But I think overall, challenges. Just being able to adapt. I don't know. I think we're humans and we get thrown at so many different situations, and I just want to adapt best at whatever the situation is going to present at the moment. I can't really say I've had any challenges where they stood out. I think every day, like I said, is a challenge, but not in a bad way. It's a challenge that I think would make me a better aviator and would make me a better person.
Yeah. Have you had any in-flight emergencies that you had to handle?
Yes, I have. At the SandPiper, I had a cabin depressurization, and I also had a cabin smoke.
Yeah.
That we handled it per the book, ran the book, brought the airplane down safely, and our training at its best did its thing.
Yeah. Now, recently, about a month ago, we have seen on the aviation forums a few articles coming in from overseas where there was a pilot that had to handle a single engine procedure in I believe it was a 777. I'm not quite sure, but it was one of the carriers over in the Middle East, actually. And at the end of the event, it was a successful landing. They ran through their emergency non-normal procedures or abnormal procedures, whatever their company calls it. They landed the aircraft. Well, she ended up suing the company for the post-traumatic stress that she incurred from the event. Now, I'm not here to judge her. I have no interest in being a sideline critic of what happened, but it did raise a few questions in our industry, especially at this level of the game. Do you see, after having two experiences where that could have been pretty traumatic, to have a cabin depressurization at altitude and have to do go through the emergency procedures to descend at a particular pace, to not injure anyone, to not injure the aircraft as well. And then also, to have smoke. I mean, that's pretty dramatic to have smoke in the cabin, or even if you have smoke in a cockpit, that could be pretty disastrous and pretty stressful. Do you think that would warrant anyone saying somebody's liable for what happened?
Well, see, just as you mentioned, I'm not in a position, because each scenario would present its own different challenges that we're not aware of, that may have been happening, from company not performing, regular maintenance inspection. Who knows what the scenario may have been? But I can tell you from personal experiences, we're so blessed to have, first of all, the safety record that we do. I mean, our airplanes are just phenomenal day in and day out. And again, sometimes when you sit down and think a million different pieces are in that thing, and if one of them goes south, the whole thing could not be working. It's a pretty, scary thing to think about. But I know from our personal experiences, and our company does a phenomenal job maintenance-wise and everything. I know the experience I encountered, it was a little bit stressful and scary at the time. But again, we reverted back to our training. What do we need to do? And like you said, okay, at the time, actually, at SandPiper, I was the first officer flying. And the captain says, well, you continue flying, you do what you need to do, and I'm going to run through the checklist, make sure we didn't miss anything. Declared an emergency, initiated the descent, and actually it turned out we blew a pack. That was the smoke that we came, and that was the pressurization, and automatically the checklist told us to, I believe, to kill both packs at the time. So we had to come down 10,000 and under. And actually, we were over Champaign coming into Chicago. So that was a huge maintenance hub at the time. So we were just able to land right there, and maintenance took the aircraft. But from personal experience, liability, I guess, goes as far as to the negligence of the parties involved, whether it's company or the contractors that, our work or whatever the inner workings are that took place. I can't personally say what took place there. And like you said, I don't want to be the guy that's going to judge something that I know nothing about. But I can tell you from personal experiences, sure, it might be stressful, but it's part of our job. It's part of our everyday thing that we're trained to do. And we know these risks, and these risks are why we're up there, to take care and make sure that we safely land the aircraft.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, Andi, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Final couple thoughts. If you could go back in time just for a moment and whisper in the ear of your younger self, what would you tell him?
So one of the things I would whisper me now too is to just take it all in and enjoy. Everything will kind of work out in the end. I know at the moment it may seem stressful and it may seem like there is no end result or positive results. But I think at the end of the day, everything works out and everything will kind of find its place. And to also keep doing what I'm doing. I think, over preparing, while it can be overworking or while it can be challenging at times, I think over preparing is a good thing. It keeps you on your toes and and it better prepared.
Yeah, keeps you in your game.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Final thought, think back to a person in your life that has made the greatest impact to your success. Who would that person be, and what do you want to say to them?
I don't want to single anybody out. and I feel like every person deserves their own thing and deserves their own appreciation, because I think everybody's had an impact one way or another. But overall, influential support, I would say my older sister has been kind of my cheerleader the whole way when times were tough and when times were good. But I've had other friends along the way and colleagues that I've met that have been such an inspiration. And again, I don't want to throw names out there and leave anybody out there, but I'm thankful for everybody that has encouraged me. And I think having that social support and seeking that social support can really be beneficial in the long run.
That's so wonderful to hear that you get it. You stand on the shoulders of all the aviators and all the supporters that have helped you on your journey. And that's wonderful to hear. Andi, where can people find you on your social, if you want to share that?
So yeah, I mostly use Instagram, and I kind of share the experiences. And I have many people that would ask me questions, and I take the time to answer everybody as far as my aviation journey or any advice they need. Instagram, you can follow me. It's Albanian, which is spelled ALBANDIAN, and you can find pretty much all my pictures over there.
Excellent. Well, I just want to say again, thank you for joining us today. I know that we got a little bit limited on time. You're off to get your second shot. I had my second shot a few days ago. which we talked about here in the beginning of the show. It kicked my butt. So good luck. Keep us updated on your progress with that. I do appreciate, again, having you on the show, and we look forward to having you again here in the near future.
Well, thank you, Tony and Rob. It's been a pleasure sharing my experiences, and yes, I have many more stories, and we'll have to do this again.
I appreciate that. All right, thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Well, in closing, I'd just like to say thank you to the frontline workers out there, the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, EMTs, medical techs, firefighters, law enforcement, grocery store employees, truck drivers, bus drivers, Amazon workers, Uber and Lyft drivers, and of course all the airline and airport employees that show up to work every day to provide the essential services that they do. Airports have been busy, right, Rob?
Oh, they're crazy. They are busy.
Yeah, and the food lines are getting a little shorter because they're opening more restaurants. Finally, I actually saw an article about this on the Aviation Business Information Board that Kyle runs, that they were talking about the food eateries at airports and how they need to reopen them up, and and how food scarcity is definitely becoming an issue. And so,
it is.
Hey.
It's awesome. It's good to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I walked through the terminal at about 9:45 this morning, DFW. And I guess it's around the time of our afternoon push, I guess. But the terminal was a zoo. I mean, we are now dodging, slow walkers.
But they're back.
The carts. Excuse the cart. And the lines. Lining up to get food for the airplanes, for the flights were, all the restaurants the lines are out the door. Oh. So, as horrible as that is to sit there and wait for food, it is a welcoming sight because people are traveling again, and that's we need your business. So welcome back. It's good to see you.
Yes, and we're very grateful. And this time of year, it's starting up. Yep.
It's crazy. So the other day we had I know this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I'm going to show you this on our little Zoom camera here. We had a hailstorm, and this was a hailstone from a town just like 2 towns from where I live.
Oh,
as soon as I can find it, I'm going to pull it up here. I got it.
Oh,
here you go. You'll probably be able to see that in the camera there.
Oh my gosh, that
isn't that crazy?
That's bigger than golf ball size. That's
it's almost the size of a baseball. Almost. I mean, it's probably the size of a racquetball.
That's crazy. I mean, I've experienced hail, nothing like that, but I learned something. I was listening to one of the podcasts that I frequent relatively, let's just say regularly, and they were talking about anybody that lives in Texas has furniture blankets in their garage.
Yep.
And I'm like, what? And they're like, yep, if there's a hailstorm coming, you throw the Fernie blankets on top of your vehicle, and that'll help prevent hail damage. And I was like, does that work? Really?
Yeah.
Little things like that. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe not for that size, but it's certainly, we'll get a lot of hail, just pea size or, even less. And you'll hear it. I have these really big windows in my house that go up to the vaulted ceiling, and when the winds are coming in right, the hail's flying. It just sounds like somebody's throwing a whole bunch of little pebbles at your window.
Yeah.
One of these days those things are going to break.
I like, in Europe, in Italy, when I would go there every summer to visit with my grandparents, the apartments or the houses there, they're in this buildings, usually, 10, 12 stories high, and you have balconies and all the way around. And usually there's like 2 residents per floor. So, one person has one side, the other person has the other. Anyway, every window, every door, everything has these shutters because people go away on vacation for usually 2 months out of the year, in August, July, August. So they go to their, houses in the country or their houses or their places at the beach, and they have this big thing. Europeans do this all over Europe. They have like this month-long vacation at least. and they leave. So they have these security shutters. Well, they act as both security shutters and weather prevention shutters. And I've seen them here in the U.S., especially I've seen quite a few in Texas where they're mounted on the outside of the window, and they go in. The ones that have them built into the home is really nice, where it's like a roll-up garage door with slots. So you can open it to the point where all the little slots show, it lets the light in, and then you can open it all the way. And then when you leave the house or you have a storm coming, you drop these things. They're on the outside of the window, and like fiberglass or whatever they're made out of. Maybe it's time to invest.
Probably. I need new windows anyway, so I'm waiting for one to come through the window anyway so I can claim it on insurance.
There you go. Call the insurance guy. Is that Jake from State Farm? Just saying.
Oh, man. Yeah, no, I have USAA. They call me right away. Hey, you had a big storm in your area. You guys okay? I'm like, yep. That's nice of them, though.
Yeah. Well, I hope that all of you out there in podcast land are enjoying Squawk Ident. Please help us out by making sure you subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident podcast. If you like what you hear, just spend a moment and write us a review on either Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. And please share the show with a friend as well. We appreciate your support and especially your feedback. You can also send us audio feedback and comments via our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can find audio archives, photos from the flight line, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, and guest book photo tab where you can see pictures from some of our guests. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search the Squawk Ident podcast. One final thank you to Andi Lusha for sharing his journey with us today. And thank you, Rob, and all you listeners out there for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe and take care of each other. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for flying with us, folks. Take care.